After the wars against Carthage began, Rome was left drained, both financially and emotionally. War-weary Romans had lost hundreds of thousands of sons to bloody battles in faraway lands. Surviving soldiers had been fighting so long, they barely remembered their homes. One thing became clear. A non-professional citizen army was no longer adequate for an empire the size of Rome's. It would fall largely to one man to professionalize the Roman military, a general and politician named Gaius Marius. Marius saw the need for far-reaching changes in the structure of the Roman army. To be a soldier would now be a career in itself, not merely a sideline for landed citizens. Marius recruited even the poorest Romans into the legions and issued them standardized equipment, making them the best outfitted soldiers in the ancient world. Including weapons, a soldier carried at least 80 pounds on his back, earning troops of this era the nickname Marius's Mules. Rome's first true professional soldiers were even more fit and better disciplined than earlier armies. But the biggest change of all, this new class of warrior had a special relationship with its commander. When they became veterans, Marius would personally see to it that his men received a grant of land, often in recently conquered territories. In the end, this was more than a generous perk for poor soldiers with no farms to return to. In fact, it was revolutionary. Suddenly, a soldier's first loyalty was to the general who recruited him and took care of him in old age, and not to the state.
For the first time, the soldier looked to the general, not only for allegiance, but for pay, for retirement benefits, if you will. And then over time, then the army began to dominate the state rather than the state dominating the army. And that's the terrible legacy of Marius.
Powerful generals now controlled their own private armies. Soon, they would use them however they saw fit, even against Rome herself. Julius Caesar.
He was a slightly built man with soft and white skin who suffered from headaches and was subject to epileptic fits. He was particular in his personal appearance and dress, was clean-shaven, and was sensitive of his premature balding. Plutarch.
Shrewd and intense, the future dictator clearly saw his path to power. Only by victory on the battlefield could a politician hope to be taken seriously as a leader in Rome. Now 40 years old, Caesar needed a war to win, and the obvious choice was to make one of his very own, in a place called Gaul. The Senate named Caesar governor of 3 provinces, Illyricum, Cisalpine, and Transalpine Gaul, the only parts of Gaul Rome controlled. Caesar hungered for the rest. The Gauls had long been the most powerful and successful people of northern and central Europe. By Caesar's time, they dominated the lands of modern France, England, and Ireland. The Romans considered them barbarians, but Gallic culture was actually quite advanced. And yet, what the Gauls were most famous for was their bloodlust in battle. They excelled in psychological warfare. They wore body paint and caked their hair with lime and mud, terrifying the methodical Romans. 5 million Gauls stood between Caesar and the glory he craved. If he could add the lands of modern France to Roman territory, he would hugely increase his reputation and his power. In 58 BC, on the excuse of stopping a Gallic tribe from entering Roman territory, Caesar moved his legions into Gaul. And for the next decade, the bold general does precisely what he set out to do: conquer. tribe after tribe, battle after battle, Caesar prevailed against the Gauls again and again. By Caesar's own accounts, it was a slaughter.
The campaign in Gaul of Julius Caesar is very well known, and very often people see it as somehow epitomizing Roman imperialism. What people forget is that Julius Caesar was proud of the fact that in Gaul he killed 1 million Gauls. That's genocide.
Though he's considered one of history's great generals, Caesar was not a tactical genius. Instead, he had incredible fortitude and a genius for inspiring others. Caesar won the devotion of his soldiers by marching alongside them, eating the same food and sleeping on the ground as they did.
He forged a military machine during these campaigns, the likes of which had not really been seen prior to this in Roman history. He built an army composed of troops that were fanatically loyal to him, particularly the legionary infantry who fought along with him.
Today, it's called Alise-Saint-Reine in modern France. In 52 BC, it was known as Alesia, the decisive battleground for Caesar's campaign. The Gauls were united under a legendary warrior chief called Vercingetorix. For Julius Caesar, this is the moment of truth. He surrounds Alesia, but he's taken by surprise when Gallic reinforcements attack from behind. Caesar must now fight two armies at once.
He basically conducted a siege in two directions. Now, what other ancient soldier would have done that? Or what soldier today would have had that degree of self-confidence in his men and self-confidence in his own leadership ability to conduct essentially a siege in two directions 500-600 miles from home? That's the mark of a genius.
He's outnumbered 5-1, but Caesar's troops eventually win the battle, capturing the infamous Vercingetorix. It was the last stand for the Gauls, and it made Julius Caesar one of the two most powerful men in Rome and the world. The other was a general and politician named Gnaeus Pompey, long a rival of Caesar's. The ambitions of these two men would soon launch Rome headlong into a bloody struggle for her own survival. The Senate recalled Caesar to Rome, but ordered him to leave his legions behind. He was between a rock and a hard place. He had to go to Rome, but if he went unprotected, he'd almost certainly be murdered by Pompey's supporters. He believed he had no other choice but to call on the loyalty of his men.
He turns to his troops and says, I'm being insulted by the state. Do you think this is a good thing? Protect me, defend my position in society. That's what the troops were marching for. At least that's how Julius Caesar put it.
It was a high-stakes game of chess using real armies. In 49 BC, in bold defiance of the Senate, Caesar took his army out of Gaul across an unassuming little stream.
We can still turn back, but once we cross that little bridge, we will have to fight it out. The die is cast. Julius Caesar.
The moment his army crossed the Rubicon, his intent became obvious to all. Caesar was marching on Rome and into civil war. The army of one Roman general against another, legion against legion. Caesar defeated Pompey, but the bloody struggle for power raged on. Even after Caesar was stabbed to death by the Senate in 44 BC, civil war and anarchy tore Rome apart.